Hello and welcome back. Before we dive into today's story, I have a little announcement. Over the next few episodes, we're going to do a series on cold cases in the West Country. I've been doing a bit of research on local cases as a cosy crime writer, and I just wanted to share some of them with you. So here we go. Today, I want to take you to the South Hams, to that beautiful stretch of South Devon where the sea can look silver and calm and beautiful on the surface, but underneath it's a different story. Its nickname is the Graveyard of Ships. So many of them have sunk in the treacherous waters off this coast. So specifically, we're going to go to Thurlestone Sands, down in Bigbury Bay. If you know this coastline, you know it's a place of broad sands, sea light and quiet coves. It's the kind of landscape that invites picnics and surfers and lazy days reading, long walks, and it's full of holiday memories for many people who know this place. It feels entirely too lovely for anything bad to happen there, which is exactly why this particular story lingers. Because in the summer of 1904, the tide brought in a man who should never have ended up there at all. His name was Frederick Kent Loomis, and even now, more than a century later, his death still feels like the beginning of a novel nobody ever finished. But unlike a cosy mystery, it was never solved. One of the reasons I love writing mysteries is because in that world, my main character always says, all problems have a solution. And in the books they do. In real life, though, I'm not so sure. That's why reading and writing stories where balance is restored and the victim gets justice is such delicious escapism, I think. To understand this particular unsolved mystery, we first have to understand the man. Frederick Kent Loomis was not was not some anonymous traveller drifting through Edwardian Europe. He was a man tethered to the highest levels of power. His brother was the United States Assistant Secretary of State, which meant Loomis moved in a world of influence, diplomacy, and private missions. In the June of 1904, Loomis was travelling aboard the magnificent ocean liner, the Kaiser Wilhelm II. So picture this, the polished teak decks, the clinking of crystal in the first-class dining room, the hushed silence as people read in the reading room, or the sound of the I just imagine there's a string quartet somewhere playing some beautiful music. And that strange, forced intimacy of strangers at sea. It's the ultimate locked room mystery setting. You're surrounded by hundreds of people, yet completely isolated by thousands of miles of deep, freezing water. But Loomis wasn't on holiday. He was acting as an American dispatch bearer, and he was carrying something incredibly valuable. Papers, essentially, reports, connecting him to a highly sensitive diplomatic mission involving a treaty of amity and commerce intended for King Menelik II of Abyssinia, which is what we now know as Ethiopia. So from the very beginning, he steps into our story as a man with a purpose. He's on a mission, quite literally, and he's a man with secrets, and possibly a man carrying something other people desperately wanted, or wanted to alter to their own ends. And so adding to all this intrigue was his travelling companion, a man named William Henry Ellis. Ellis was a larger-than-life character. He was a wealthy, ambitious Wall Street broker who had his own audacious private plans involving the Ethiopian throne. They were two men bound together by a high-stakes mission, sailing across the Atlantic towards Europe. And that's where the mystery starts to darken. As the Kaiser Wilhelm II crossed the ocean, everything seemed to be going as planned. But at some point during the voyage, just before the great ship reached the port of Plymouth, Frederick Kent Loomis vanished. One moment he was a passenger on a floating palace, and the next he was gone. Did he fall? Did he jump? Or did something happen to him in the dark, in that enclosed floating world where everyone is trapped and nobody can just walk away? When the ship docked, the alarm was raised, but no clear public answer settled the question then, and no clear answer settles it now. Loomis was missing, and the precious diplomatic documents he was carrying were thrust into chaos. And then comes the South Hams part of this story, the part that makes this international case feel so hauntingly local. For nearly a month, the sea kept her secrets, but the ocean rarely holds on to things forever. On the 17th of July, 1904, a local labourer was walking along the shore at Thurlestone Sands in Bigbury Bay. The summer sun would have been shining on the water, and the iconic arched Thurlestone Rock standing watch just offshore. And there, washed up on the sand, was a body. It was Frederick Kent Loomis. You can feel the contrast immediately, can't you? This calm, beautiful Devon shore suddenly becoming the final scene in a global mystery. But what makes the case even stranger, what elevates it from a tragic accident at sea to a true cold case, is the medical evidence discovered during the inquest. When the local coroner examined Loomis's remains, they found something deeply disturbing. Loomis had suffered a severe incapacitated blow to the back of the head. And most importantly, the medical evidence suggested that this injury occurred before he entered the water. And that single detail changes absolutely everything. Because once you hear that, the sea doesn't feel like the whole story. It starts to feel like the place where the story was hidden. A bad slip could be imagined. An accident on a wet deck in the midnight fog could be argued. But a crushing head injury before going overboard, that leaves a shadow over every simpler explanation. Did he uncover a plot? Was there an argument behind a closed cabin door? Was he murdered by foreign agents or by someone much closer to him, all for the sake of the treaty he carried? In other words, was it planned? And despite this glaring piece of evidence, the case drifted into uncertainty, and the official outcome of the inquest was an open verdict. And if you read a lot of mysteries, you know that an open verdict is one of those frustrating bureaucratic phrases that sounds tidy but explains almost nothing. It simply means the death was never fully resolved. It means suspicion remained, but certainty didn't. And so, as a writer and as a reader, what are we left with? We're left with Frederick Kent Loomis himself, a well-connected American courier, travelling on a prestigious liner, carrying the weight of empires in his briefcase, only to disappear before landfall and reappear on a South Hams beach with a violent wound no one could comfortably explain. And we're left with William Henry Ellis, who calmly took possession of the treaty after Loomis vanished and continued on his journey to Abyssinia, stepping into the pages of history while his travelling companion lay in a Devonshire morgue. We're left with a setting that feels almost fictional in its deep contrast, global politics and imperial ambition on one side, and on the other, the quiet, unsuspecting beauty of South Devon. And we're left with the big question that always arises in cases like this. Was he actually murdered? And if so, why and by who? I've got an unshakable sense that somewhere once somebody knew exactly what happened on that fateful journey. But in the end, the sea, as it so often does, swallowed the one detail that would have made the whole thing make sense. And more than a century later, Thurlestone Sands, the beach closest to where I live, and one of my favourite all-time beaches, still holds the last chapter of a story no one has ever truly solved.